Good morning and welcome to our second annual DEIJ Empowerment Summit. My name is Christina Marshall and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce our Chancellor this morning, Peter Provenzano.
Well, thank you, Christina. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for our second annual DEIJ Empowerment Summit. This summit reflects our commitment at OCC to providing meaningful and transformative change in a time unlike any other, really. And we're doing it together. We're developing our understanding and awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as increasing our commitment to change. In other words, we are taking action, and I'm very proud of the work of our Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice, as well as the college's DEIJ committee and our DEIJ advisory groups. Thank you for all your hard work, your commitment, and partnership to this incredible initiative. The work we're doing is foundational to not only our personal, but also our professional relationships and our efforts to positively impact our community. Building DEIJ into our strategic plan ensures this work is carried forward. And that's so important because this helps to ensure that this is all woven into the fabric of our organization and helps us prepare our students for greater opportunities and a truly vibrant and global-based economy that we're living in right now. And I'm proud to say that we've experienced notable changes here at OCC in this area, and we're honored to have the generous support. In fact, we couldn't do it without the generous support from PNC Bank, who is sponsoring many of our signature programs and allowing us to make an even bigger impact at OCC as well as in our community. So I want to thank you for joining us, as well as our keynote. She asked for us to call her Loretta Ross. So thank you, Loretta, for joining us today, as well as Mr. Michael Bickers, who's regional president and a good friend from PNC Bank. I'd also like to thank our Vice Chancellor for Human Resources and DEIJ, Andre Poplar, and our Director of DEIJ, Christina Marshall. And again, thank all of you for being here today. Your commitment to foster change and make a difference ensures our community is better for all. And so now I'd like to turn the program over to Mr. Bickers, who will provide a few remarks. Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Peter. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, everyone. What a great Friday morning. I'd just like to say and emphasize that our partnership with OCC is so deep and really personal for me and all of my immediate team here at PNC. It's a part of our sort of strategic network we use of our wonderful partners to help advance our cause relative to DEI&J, because we can't do it alone. So we like to kind of run what I call an inside-outside game. And inside of PNC in support of children through our Grow Up Great program, where we spend hundreds of millions of dollars over the years to support children who need us most in some of our most underinvested communities. And then outside of PNC, as a part of all of that work, how do we invest in those communities, those small businesses, those young adults and children out there that want to do great things? And so we're so happy and proud to be here today and tell you that our commitment to all of that work is never ending and never anything less than urgent. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Bickers, and thank you to PNC Bank. At this time, it is my honor and my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Loretta J. Ross, who is an associate professor at Smith College. As of 2022, recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award. She's an activist, public intellectual, and scholar. Her passion is innovating, creative, imagining about global human rights and social justice issues. As the third director of the first rape crisis center in the country in the 1970s, she's helped launch the movement to end violence against women that has evolved into today's Me Too movement. She also founded the first center in the United States to innovate creative human rights education for all students so that social justice issues are more collaborative and less divisive. She has also deprogrammed members of hate groups, leading to conceptualizing and writing a book on calling in the calling out culture to transform how people can overcome political differences, to use empathy and respect to guide difficult conversation. Loretta started her career in activism and social change in the 1970s, working at the National Football League Players Association, the DC Rape Crisis Center, the National Organization for Women, the National Black Women's Health Project, the Center for Democratic Renewal, the National Center for Human Rights Education, and Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collection, until retiring as an organizer in 2012 to teach about activism. Her most recent books are Reproductive Justice: An Introduction, co-written with Ricky Salger, and Radical Reproductive Justice: Foundations, Theories, Practice, and Critique. Her forthcoming book, Calling in the Calling Out Culture, is due in 2024. She has been quoted in the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and the Washington Post, among others. In addition, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2023. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce to all of you, Loretta Ross.
Well, thank you for that wonderful yet embarrassing introduction. When you listed all of my jobs, you'd think I went from a different job every year, but in fact, that spans 50 years. So I did try to stick with the job at least 3 to 4, maybe longer years instead of just job jump. But it is my honor and privilege to talk to y'all today. I've had the privilege of being a part of some very transformative movements in the history of this country. And I take such joy and excitement in seeing how treating people with love and respect can change hearts and minds. And I've had the interesting experience of talking to the most unlikely people and having very productive conversations with them. I'm a rape survivor who talked Black feminist theory, for example, to men who had been incarcerated for raping and murdering women just like me. I've taught human rights to former members of the Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nations and the militia movement. And I discovered in myself a capacity I didn't know that I had, which was to have very challenging conversations under very difficult circumstances and learning how to do so with love and respect instead of anger, blaming, and shaming. So that brings me to the preface for my remarks today. Right now, all of us who are engaged in justice work, whether we're doing it for diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether we're doing it for reproductive justice, climate justice, economic justice, queer justice, all of these justice frameworks are all under attack at the same time, even on different tracks, by people who are opposed to human rights. And they think that they're fighting us, but I think they're mistaken because they're not fighting us. They're fighting forces far beyond their abilities to control because they're fighting the truth and they're fighting history and they're fighting evidence. And most of all, they're fighting time. And there is no force of humanity that can defeat truth, evidence, history, and time. no matter how desperately they want to roll us back to the 19th century. They won't win. So with truth, time, evidence, and history on our side, my biggest fear is that our call out culture will force us to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory because we will cannibalize each other instead of learning how to turn to each other. We will learn to turn on each other as we fight in our silos for justice and not recognizing the interconnected framework called human rights that brings us all together. And for the forces who are fighting DEIJ, I want to remind them that the freedom to learn is a human right. And by definition, you are aligning yourself in opposition to human rights. And I want to ask them, is that who you really want to be? Is that how you want to walk through the world? To be defined as a human rights violator? As you are challenging people's right to read, the right to learn, the right to hear a diversity of viewpoints, the right to make up their own minds instead of being brainwashed? Is that who you really want to be? So I'm going to use a PowerPoint to hopefully process through my presentation more efficiently, because I am a professional talker. And if you leave me to my own devices, I may scatter thought because, I devoted to tennis and I may talk about Serena Williams or something. So I'm going to share my screen and share with you a PowerPoint. I do have to confess that I produced the world's worst PowerPoint because they have so many words on the page and they're very, very dense. So that I hope that you be prepared to ask in the Q&A section of this conversation any questions that may occur to you as I rush through my PowerPoint. I am reserving 15 minutes so that we can have hopefully a robust discussion about some of the concepts that are involved in calling people in instead of calling them out. So let me start the share screen process. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I actually stumbled on to the concept of calling out because I was working with young people. And once I discovered how vicious they were towards each other over the internet, particularly through social media, I asked young people, what's going on here? Because I'm sure y'all are saying things to each other that you wouldn't dare say in person. And they named it the call out culture. And I asked them, well, what are y'all doing about it? And they kind of shrugged their shoulders as if it was inevitable. And I began processing my 50 years of social justice and human rights activism. I'm saying, wait a moment, we called it trashing back in the 70s, but we still knew how to strategically unite in the face of our opponents. You should have heard about the fights that the civil rights leaders like Dr. King and C.T. Vivian and Ralph David Abernathy had behind closed doors, but they knew how to unite in the face of segregation. And so why don't we learn how to make new mistakes instead of making the old mistakes and do something differently? And so I began about 6 years ago investigating the calling out culture. And currently I teach how to respond to it online in what I call my $5 lectures. And you can sign up for them through my website if at all you're interested. I call myself the Walmart of consciousness raising around the call out culture because it's only $5. But it's really important to start with an articulation, not only what we're fighting against, but we have to be able to be crystal clear on what we're fighting for, because we just can't be defined by what's happened to us. What would happen if we actually won? If we wanted to create a justice-centered world? And that's why hope is important. because hope doesn't deny the crimes and suffering of the past or the present. What we do matters because of those horrors. And so we often need to prepare ourselves for what they call the butterfly or the domino effect, because we know what we do, we know why we do it, but we often, as Foucault says, don't know what we do does. We don't know what the impacts will be of what we've done. And so that's why it's so important to do our work with honor, with integrity. We cannot violate human rights and protect them at the same time. So we can't do work for women's rights in a racist way. We can't do work for civil rights in a homophobic way. We can't do work for trans rights in a misogynist way, because we can't violate the human rights of the people who are in the movement with ourselves. And that requires us to embrace not only uncertainty, but diversity, and be willing to know that what we're doing will have consequences that may be still unfolding many years from now. And we also have to recognize that changing hearts and minds is some of the most difficult work in the world. I think it would be easier to levitate people to defy gravity than to get somebody to quickly change their mind from their heart-held and heartfelt beliefs. And so this means all that we're doing is experimental. We will try 99 strategies for producing change until we reach that 100 sweet spot. And so we shouldn't expect perfectionism in the work. We shouldn't expect that we can only work with perfect people in the work, and that would be in any workplace by the matter, but I'm talking about the human rights movement. The other thing that I try to convey is that we're not in control of the timeline, that the movement against oppression is forever, that you don't get to decide how fast that transformative change will happen. One of the ways that they used to say it in the civil rights movement is stop assuming that you are the entire chain of freedom and what you do is so important that everything rests on your shoulders, because the chain of freedom stretches backwards towards our ancestors and forward towards our descendants. And so the most important thing you can do is to ensure that the chain of freedom doesn't break at your link. That's your job. Don't give up at your link. Don't give up. Don't give in to despair and apathy and cynicism because you're not in charge of the timeline. Because your ancestors and your descendants are depending on you not breaking the link. And I do fundamentally believe that calling in practices are so important about how we build and protect democracy, that it will affect the human rights movement in the 21st century, the same way that nonviolent strategies as a statement of values of how they valued all humanity affected the 20th century civil rights movement. I've talked about the human rights framework. Obviously, I'm part of the women's rights wing of the human rights movement. I'm disabled. I'm part of the disability rights wing of the human rights movement. I don't have enough space to put all the arrows on the page that we all care about. But the point is, I want us to realize that we are part of something bigger than us, and we can use the human rights framework to become more than we ever imagined we could become, as we learn how to join hands together to fight for justice, democracy, and freedom. So I've invented something that I call the C5 continuum, calling in the calling in framework. I think we're all very familiar with what calling out is, because that's publicly criticizing people for something you think they've done wrong, for which they need to be held accountable. And you want to publicly call them out because you want not only you to hold them accountable, but you're summoning the mob over the internet or at your church or at your job site or whatever to hold them accountable with public shaming. Obviously, if you wanted someone to simply correct an action that you thought they did wrong, you could speak to them privately. You could pull them to the side and say, hey, can we have coffee to talk about something you said yesterday at the meeting? You have that choice. So the fact that you've chosen not to use that private way of accountability and you've chosen to make it public, that's what makes it a calling out. Now, the ultimate calling out is canceling somebody. You're trying to cancel them because you want to get them good. You want them to lose their job, lose their platform, or at least lose their reputation because you don't want them to be able to make an atonement, to repair the harm that they've done. You've actually used the tactic of what we call the prison industrial complex to silence them, to exile them, to dispose of them, and to create the conditions that either they will not be heard from again, or if they are heard from, no one will take them seriously. Also on the continuum is calling in. Now, a lot of people think mistakenly that calling in is the opposite of calling out, but it's actually not, because calling out, canceling, and calling in are all accountability processes. They're not, accountability is not the opposite of unaccountability. They're all accountability processes. But when you use calling in tactics, instead of using anger, blaming, and shaming to achieve accountability, you're using love and respect as your choice. And you call people in not because of who they are, you call people in because of who you are. You are offering to the world how you want to walk through the world, how you want to demonstrate an ability to treat people with love, respect, and forgiveness. And you're offering how you would like to be treated as well, so that mistakes don't become fatal, so that reputations don't become permanently damaged, that we could stop the expectation that we have an opportunity to work with perfect people who never make mistakes and no one will ever call us out because we don't ever make mistakes. We can stop that false belief in the perfectionism of humanity. Calling on is that intermediate step, because whether you call somebody in or out, it requires an investment of your time and attention into another person. And sometimes you're just not feeling that. You're not feeling like I want to give somebody time and attention when they have caused harm. So calling on is the request that the person simply do better. And my favorite calling on sentence is just to, when somebody says something to me that's off key, off kilter, I just look them dead in the eye and I wait and I say, I beg your pardon. And then I wait again. And quite often, people will start walking back their own words without me saying anything further because they discover that what they said didn't land in the way they anticipated. And that's when you're really requiring people to do better. Come at me another way. What about me makes you think you can say that racist thing to me? What about me makes you think you can do that little homophobic or transphobic joke to me? Am I giving off a signal that I would welcome that? I really need you to do better. And the fifth C is calling it off. That's your strategy of disengagement, because you have no obligation to engage in unproductive conversations with people who are bringing no joy into the world, who are operating in bad faith, who don't mind lying and manipulating people, who are gaslighting you and denying the obvious truths. And whether it's in person or online, you have the option to call it off, because again, the whole 5C continuum is about the choices you get to make. And you're not doing it for someone else, you're doing it for yourself. And so I believe we need to transform to a calling in culture. I think it is possible to create a culture of accountability through love and with integrity at the same time. We can address harm without creating more harm. It's a truism that hurt people. They think they're given license to hurt other people because of what they've been through. And that's, of course, is just going to create a whole lot of other people who are hurting without any justice achieved and without any accountability achieved. I think if we believe in the values of inclusion, not exclusion, then calling in has to be the norm and not just an ideal to bring people into the movement with and make sure we create this welcoming, fun, and informative and joyful atmosphere for them. And one of the things I often say, if you think that you're in a woke competition, all that proves to me is that you're not nearly as woke as you think you are. So we should be able to and eager to embrace people all along the continuum of their consciousness raising and their learning and not dump on them because, well, all you did was put up a Black Lives Matter sign. That's just performative. I hate that word, performative, because it indicates a naivete and a dismissiveness about other people's contributions to the movement. The person making that accusation rarely has done any research into that person that they're talking about. They don't know if that's all that they can do. You don't even know what else they are doing. But you're making the assumption that you get to judge somebody else's contributions to the movement based on standards that are arbitrarily set by you, when in fact you wouldn't even invite or welcome that same critique of your own social justice practices. And so, as I often tell the students in my class, if somebody puts up a Black Lives Matter sign and they're white, you already know the most important thing you ever need to know about them. And they say, well, what is that? And I say, well, they're not on the other side. Nobody in the Ku Klux Klan has ever put up a Black Lives Matter sign. Nobody who's extreme homophobe has ever put up a Black Lives Matter sign. So at worst, this person is a potential or problematic ally, but what they are not is an enemy. And you are making a strategic mistake by treating them as an enemy out of your arrogance and ignorance, which reveals much more about you than it does them. And then the students kind of start grumbling at me after I point out that, 18-year-olds don't care much for being told that they're not sophisticated. Anyway, it is important to understand that how we do the work is as important as the work we do. As I said, we can't protect human rights by violating human rights. So calling in invites us to be self-reflective, to correct the inevitable mistakes that we made, to not feel ashamed of the mistakes that we are all going to make with each other, but be proud of our ability to self-correct, to learn, to offer forgiveness of ourselves and for others. And it's really important to use calling in to disrupt our replication and internalization of oppression, of oppressive spaces, and not replicate the very system that we try to say we're opposing: the punishment, the exiling, the silencing, the disposability. And so it helps us learn healing strategies for ourselves and others. I define calling out, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the interest of time, but we generally are criticizing other people's social justice practices while not being critical of our own, because it's driven by feeling unheard, disrespected, or violated. I see a lot of people weaponize their knowledge. You don't know this word. We don't use that word anymore. You got my gender pronoun wrong. You're oppressive, blah, blah, blah. And they want to banish people because they're not woke enough. And sometimes this is driven by the desire to control, to boost their ego, or to virtue signal their standing in the community. And then sometimes it even manifests as ideological bullying. If you don't share my pure political opinion, then you are on the side of the oppressor. And I have the license to do whatever I want to you because I've defined you as the enemy. Now, there is a reason that the call out culture or the cancel culture is being criticized so deeply now by those people who are opposed to human rights, because previously they monopolized the power to punch down on people who couldn't punch back. And now this power has been democratized. And I won't bother to read Ta-Nehisi's quote on it, but basically it says that anybody with a Twitter handle or a Facebook account can put out information I get a lot of calls from, for example, corporate America, from people in the C-suite who are astonished that the world has changed so fast that they are used to their worst critics being their competitors. And now they're finding that their worst critics are on their own payrolls and they don't know how to handle that. And that's one of the toxic impacts of the call out culture, that we can't shut people up or down. We can't control people through their loyalty to a paycheck anymore because they're more loyal to the idea of getting respect. And so it's a real rapidly changing culture that's catching politicians, C-suite people, academic leaders, nonprofit executives. And I don't even want to go on how the nonprofit world is imploding because of the call out culture, but it's affecting everybody. And so we need to analyze what is going on, come up with appropriate responses to it. But before people criticize me too much, I do want to say that there are appropriate uses of call outs, because we do need to use them when there's power disparities, when people intentionally make themselves inaccessible to us, when they've been offered a chance to change, like a politician getting feedback from their constituents that they ignore repeatedly. There's times you need to use call outs because you don't want to contribute to the conditions that continue the harm. And you tried, through private means to stop it. Now you got to go public. You can use call outs to find others who are going through the same thing that you've been through, and build community with these other people by spreading information. And sometimes this information is about revealing unmarked or hidden structures of harm or privileges. And you can equalize the voices from those that have historically not been heard from. And of course, discharge of rage is always good. So people use calling out to release that outrage. And there are rare times when public shaming works. Unfortunately, that's becoming less and less an effective strategy. But I'm not surprised that people trying to do human rights work use call outs as a tactic, because in fact, that's what the human rights movement does. I mean, we call out people, we call out governments, we call out corporations that are violating people's human rights. But what people don't understand about the human rights movement is that that's our tactic of last resort. It is not our tactic of first resort, because first we try to talk to people. We try to find common ground with people that we oppose. We want to share information with people that we oppose. We do not dehumanize leaders of these organizations and only see them through the lens of the power that they wield, because we don't want to forget their humanity behind that power. So when we resort to the call out tactic, the public shaming tactic, it's because we've tried a whole lot of other steps first. But right now in the internet, social media culture, people are impatient with all those other steps. They just want to go to the call out as if that's the best way to get people to change. But in fact, it's the least effective way to get people to change, because someone suspects that they're going to be publicly humiliated and shamed for something that they've done. Chances are they're going to do everything in their power to avoid that confrontation. Nobody runs towards the firing squad. Everybody runs from the firing squad. So if you think you're going to achieve accountability by teeing people up for a public call out, think again, because it is not human to rush towards a public humiliation. As a matter of fact, what people most often do is double down. They deny that they did anything wrong. They deny that they need to apologize for what they've done, and they deny that they need to do anything differently. So it's paradoxical that the call out culture does not produce the results that people think that it should. And of course, we can all speculate and recognize that people with power, influence, celebrity, calling them out just makes them more famous most times. It doesn't stop them from the harm that you think they've done. And so call outs don't achieve these goals. I want to offer this taxonomy of the 7 stages of the calling out cancel culture by Natalie Wynn. She's a very popular podcaster, YouTuber with a program called ContraPoints. When someone gets called out, let's say someone is accused of being racist, sexist, toxic, manipulative, power hungry, whatever the words are used, it doesn't really matter. You can do a mono substitution on which word gets used. Instead of a presumption of innocence, once somebody has been accused, there's a presumption of guilt. There's no due process to investigate whether what the person said was actually racist, sexist, toxic, etc. Just by being accused, there is a presumption of guilt. And it has this silencing effect because people really don't want to necessarily get into a messy situation between an accuser and the accused. And this accusation gets so quickly abstracted that it moves rapidly from you said something racist into an essentialized mode of saying you are a racist. So it goes from criticizing something that somebody said that has been deemed problematic to now they're a problematic person with a horrible moral character. And the people making this kind of accusation usually do it from a pseudo-moralistic or a pseudo-intellectual stand. I know what sexism is. I'm a woman. I know what transphobia is. I am trans. I know, and you don't get to debate that because you do not share my identity or my experience, not recognizing that what you've been through ain't a resume. You got to have some knowledge attached to that, to actual knowledge. And this is often based upon a dualistic system of false binaries. I'm right, you're wrong, I'm straight, you're gay, I'm good, you're bad. We're all taught that kind of absolutist binary system as children. And we take it for granted that that black and white world is how things are actually organized. We are not taught to appreciate nuance or ambiguity or anything. And once such a set of accusations has been made, then it descends into what I call the culture of unforgivability and the culture of unforgettability. Because once that person has been accused of being toxic or manipulative or power hungry, then that's going to be the permanent whisper about them. No one will ever forget. Oh, you know, Joe, when he said that thing at the staff meeting, you know what Joe is now, right? That'll be the gossip about him forever. And then the unforgivability part is that, you know, the mythical Joe is caught up in a bind. Because if Joe says, oh my God, I made a mistake, let me try to apologize. Well, then Joe is going to be seen as trying to game the system. That's a faux apology. He doesn't really mean it. But if Joe said, well, I didn't say anything wrong, so I'm not going to apologize, then he's going to be read as trying to evade accountability. So he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. There is no win. And then Joe certainly develops the political cooties because he's contaminated now. And anybody who tries to come to Joe's defense, they must be racist too. They must be toxic too. They are an enabler of this bad behavior that we need to call out. And so that has the impact of silencing anybody who says, well, wait a minute, what we just did needs to be examined. It might not have been fair. It might not have been true. That closes out all that kind of discussion because few people will paint a target on their own foreheads after they've seen what happened to Joe. And so by offering this taxonomy, we can analyze what is actually going on in the call out culture, recognize the different steps that it goes through, build containers for all the parties involved. But it really does start with preemptively creating a calling in culture at the outset. So we learn to give people the benefit of the doubt, that we learn not to overreact to simply somebody making an accusation, that we give due process a chance to work, that we encourage people who could be bystanders to speak up, to participate in this shared conversation. I think one of the things driving the call out culture is that we have such an imprecise definition of what is harm. People will say, "Oh, you used the wrong word for me. You have violated me. I feel harmed. I feel traumatized. I feel so unsafe." Just the mere use of those words shuts down every discussion because you're accused of furthering, triggering, or somebody's pre-existing injury, and now you're an oppressor in the oppressor role. So it really is incumbent upon us just to better define what we mean by harm. Harm is when we experience actual physical, emotional, or psychological injury, or when we cause it to somebody else. We abuse or misuse power with the intentionally keeping others from accessing their human rights. Often harm is from misunderstanding, assumptions, or mistake. For example, if someone steps on my toe, and it hurts, the first thing I want to know is, did they intend it or not? Because if they did it accidentally, I'm going to have a different response than if they did it intentionally. My toe still hurts. I am still harmed, but my response has to be in proportion to whether it was intended or not. And so right now, all we see is these declarative statements. You have hurt me. You have traumatized me. You have harmed me, without no examination of context or intent. And it's shutting down human to human conversation. It is precipitating and amplifying the call out culture, and it's furthering the divisions because instead of inviting people into conversations, we're inviting them into fights as if that's the way we achieve justice. So what harm is not is when we disagree with each other over personal or political issues, when somebody makes us uncomfortable, when somebody requests accountability for, examining the impact of our behaviors, and certainly what has happened to you, your victim or traumatized status is not a bargaining chip, a competition, what we call the oppression Olympics, or something that gives you an advantage in a difficult or challenging situation so that you never get questioned. I think we overstate harm because we don't have healthy models for dealing with it. It's impossible to get through life without hurting somebody else or getting hurt. But when we reduce ourselves to this particular status as that traumatized victim, and that's all we are, we're permanently defined by what happened to us, not the possibilities of what we could become. But we wrap this victim mantle around ourselves so securely, we tend to find ourselves exaggerating or overstating harm. And what that does, it prevents us from building resilience and the coping skills to live an active and productive life and have productive relationships. And then we tend to focus on the symptoms of an issue instead of the root cause. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, the president of my college issued a letter telling what the college was going to do in response to an active shooter drill. Of course, every college administrator, president, or something has to be concerned about what could happen at the institution because of what is happening in society. And the student response to the letter was funny if it wasn't so tragic, because one of the students in my class totally derailed the class period by talking about how triggered she was by receiving a letter about an active shooter drill. That it just, she grew up with active shooter drills all K through 12. And in college, she didn't expect to have to deal with that. And just getting this letter from the president just made her feel so unsafe. And, you have to teach with love and respect. So I took a deep breath, calling myself in first. And I said, let me just understand what you're saying. An active shooter drill is like a fire drill. And in case of fire, wouldn't you rather have practice what to do rather than be caught off guard by a fire? I mean, that's the purpose of the president's letter, so we can get practice on what to do in case something happens. And so the student was only seeing this letter through the lens of her trauma, having grown up with active shooter drills and feeling re-traumatized. And then because, I'm a child of the 50s and 60s, I said, we used to get drills on hiding under our desk in case of nuclear bombs. Every generation has its issue of an external threat that they're trying to prepare us for. And I don't think hiding under a desk in case of a nuclear bomb would have been very effective, but we practice it. And right now in this society, we need to practice active shooter drills. I'm sorry that's the case, but would you rather me protect you from the truth or teach you about the truth? I choose to teach you about the truth because I don't think failing to teach you about it is effective teaching. So I'm just saying that she wanted to address the symptoms of what the president had precipitated instead of the root cause of what was underlying that. And we do have to do so acknowledging that the feelings that are stimulated by trauma and harm are very real, but they're not factual. Just because something in the present time reminds you of something that happened to you in the past, that doesn't mean the present is the past, even though the feelings are real. And people do want to be validated completely in their experiences, even if they know that life is always more complex. So the whole calling out culture is very, very toxic. It replicates, like I say, the prison system. It discourages people from joining the movement. It frightens people up, out of speaking up to tell the truth. In fact, it drives people away. It weaponizes privilege and language. It makes accountability very, very difficult because it increases the harm rather than the healing. It devalues people's lived experiences simply by saying, if your lived experiences make you come to a different conclusion than my lived experiences made me come, then you must be wrong because my lived experiences are the real truth, kind of thing. And so it isolates people instead of unifying them. It makes them very cynical, and it can spiral out of control so quickly, disproportionately in relationship to the original incident, the original microaggression or whatever. And then it becomes very viral when it's done through social media, because it's one thing for one person to criticize you. It's another thing when they can summon 10,000 people to say the same thing about you. And that's what we're experiencing.
Loretta, we have about 15 minutes.
Well, then thank you for letting me know. Let me
You're welcome.
end this presentation. I obviously have a lot more I could cover, but I think y'all have gotten the basics, and I think we should have time for Q&A. Thank you for giving me that time warning.
Oh, you're welcome. So we do have just a couple of items. They're not questions, but thank you. I really needed to hear this to help me grow stronger as a person and employee. And someone else wrote, I don't have a question, but I want to express my appreciation for the thoughtfulness, balance, insight, wisdom, and informedness of Ms. Ross.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I know my conversations, my presentations are very dense. And so that's why I ask people to start thinking about stuff they would like me to explain in more detail as I was presenting. I am writing, as you heard, a book on the topic, but I'm just one of many, many people who are challenging the divisiveness of our society, whether or not we can take the risk of being more human, more authentic, and more real to each other, and not succumb to the manipulation of people's hatreds for the profits of those who are willing to manipulate their power as a way of making money and making people hate and distrust each other. We cannot defend democracy under these present circumstances unless we learn to value each other's humanity, respect, and learn from each other's differences, and really enjoy the possibility not of owning more, but the possibility of becoming more, which is the greatest joy in the world.
So we do have, I liked your specific example of how you called in the student who was triggered by the active shooter drill. Would you feel comfortable adding another example?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, let me
Yeah,
just,
and we have, and just, I'm sorry, Loretta, just so you know, we have some other questions, so just for the sake of time too.
okay. Well, first of all, you have to recognize that the first person you have to call in is yourself so that you don't overreact to someone you think needs to be held accountable. So I remember I said I had to take a deep breath before I responded to that student. So I have to call myself in a dozen times a day because I'm the call out queen. I have quick judgmentalism. I'm impatient with fools and mean people. So I always have to calm myself down before I give that first response out of my mouth. By the way, which is a great parenting technique because I'm a grandmother. And if I hadn't called myself in before I said some things to my kid, it would have been a whole different parenting experience. So let me think of um, something. Well, let me just give an example that happened in my classroom a couple of years ago. In my college, like many, we have this exquisite dance of gender pronouns. My name is so and so, and my pronouns are blah, 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 blah. And so, of course, I have that ritual in my class. And so, shortly after the semester began, I misgendered a student. And I froze because I said, oh my God, I'm about to have this poor student jump down my throat because, I should not have done that. And this 18-year-old spoke up and said, oh, that's all right, professor. I misgender myself sometimes. And all I could do was be awed by how this 18-year-old was offering me grace and forgiveness and understanding that we're all learning and we're all trying and not weaponizing my mistake against me. And that's the kind of forgiveness and growth we all need to engage in. So that's a real example. And I'm still stunned by the maturity of that 18-year-old who wasn't using their identity and weaponizing it against me, even though there was a power imbalance between the professor and the student. And generally in those situations, the people with the least power grab any weapon possible to try to regain control and power, because that's a lot of what's driving the call out culture as well. So that's a very real example. I do remember a call out that I regret making. There's another example because I was one of 12 Black women who created reproductive justice, the theory, framework, and practice. And yet a young woman who was trying to build herself up claimed that she created the theory, and she said so very publicly. And I called her out because I was hurt. You don't get to commit intellectual theft on Black women, and you ain't even Black. I mean, what are you doing? And I regretted calling her out over social media because there was a 50-year difference almost in our ages. I got defined as her bully. I was an elder who was not creating space for young women to have power in the movement. But all I could see was my hurt and pain because I forgot to look at her and ask her a very important question. Why would you try to steal something that was a gift? I mean, what's going on with you that you would seek to become famous that way? And I regret that. I really regret that I didn't pay attention to her pain and her humanity and actually use my elder status and maturity in a different way because I was only reacting to my pain. So I have a million examples that are in my book.
Thank you so much. Someone else said this is a fantastic presentation. They wanted an example, so you provided that. The other item is, can you give your insight on the J.K. Rowling transphobia thing? Some in the queer community think that supporting the Harry Potter franchise in any way is turning their back on the trans community. This feels like a difficult predicament for many.
I laugh every time I get asked that question because I was asked to give a calling in presentation at the annual Harry Potter conference a couple of months ago. And this whole conference, which is full of Harry Potter cosplayers and worshipers, wanted to disown J.K. Rowlings. They wouldn't use her name. They didn't want to say it. They wanted to separate the art from the artist, kind of thing. And I said, and so my response to that is, who else would you disown because they weren't perfect people to produce the art that you enjoy? Would you stop speaking of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King because he sang in a Pickaninny choir at Gone with the Wind? Would you not look at a Picasso because he exploited women? Do you still not enjoy the Cosby Show because of Bill Cosby's problematic here? Or is it that you can't forgive J.K. Rowling because she ain't dead or in prison or what's going on? I think that we have to see art in the context of what the artist is and does, as opposed to try to separate them. I think it's the most contradictory, complex people that produce some of the most exquisite art. And so we've got to stop putting artists on pedestal because of the greatness of their arts and recognize that they're the same flawed human beings with the particular talent we all wish we had, and really deeply contextualize them. And so if I ever had a chance to talk to JK, I would probably say, here's the pathway towards redemption if you care, but I'm not going to stop reading Harry Potter because of who you are. I actually appreciate Harry Potter now because I know more about who you are.
Professor,
That doesn't usually go over very well because everybody wants me to call her out and condemn her. But I don't even call out the Ku Klux Klan. What would I do be calling out J.K. Rowling? I mean, really? Hate is not the way I work.
all right, someone else said that they truly enjoyed this. And do you have any resources to continue learning about this topic that maybe you can share with me and I can share, or I don't know if you have something you can put in the chat for us?
I always recommend as your first read Adrienne Maree Brown's book, We Will Not Cancel Us. I'm not sure if I got the title totally accurate, but Adrienne Maree Brown, Cancel. If you Google those two, her name and that word, you'll find that book. It's a quick, accessible read from someone who's a leader in transformative and restorative justice, who talks about how we need to respond with love to all the violence and hopelessness we see in the world. And it's a very moving and accessible. And it's one of those quick reads you can read in a couple of hours. It's not that dense tome that you have to pick up, put down, pick up and put down. It's a joy to read. So I think I would start with Adrienne Maree Brown's We Will Not Cancel Us.
Okay, we're gonna have one last question, and that is, this talk is very powerful. I support the support of what I perceive as incredible corruption, narcissism, transphobia, racism, anti-democratic rhetoric, and peddling of falsehoods. How do you suggest or to respond to posts about these things on social media?
Well, again, intent matters. I actually have a strategy that I call my spheres of influence. And that is, there are people with whom we have a high degree of unity, with which we share a vocabulary. When I say something like the heteropatriarchy, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And there are people who would work with me who get turned off by that elite language. So I'm going to have to use something else like women and girls empowerment. And then there are people like my parents who are middle of the roaders who could go to the right or the left, depending on whether they were listening to the minister or their daughter. And so to them, I'd have to speak to the values. Like my parents would feed the hungry. And as a human rights activist, I get to ask why they're hungry in the first place. So I can show them that I'm living out their values in a different way. And then there are people who are adjacent to my parents who are very, very confused. So they'll be the ones that come from my own community saying, I think all them women need to be kicked off welfare because they all lazy, blah, 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 because they're coming from their own set of working hard and blah, 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 and believing that other people ain't working as hard. And then there are people outside of them who are just dedicated to profiting off of hate. And so I don't have enough shared world overview with the people profiting off of hate to even want to bother to call them in, because it wouldn't work anyway. They know what they're doing. They are intentionally profiting off of hate. So those are the people I want to out organize. They are not the people I'm trying to call in. But everybody else that I just named, I think there's a possibility of conversation.
Fantastic. Well, we want to say thank you, Loretta, for your words of wisdom. I did not close out the Q&A because I figured before you left, you might want to read some of those wonderful comments of thank you to you, so you can do that. But we want to say thank you for your wisdom that you have imparted on us and for kicking off our second annual DEIJ Empowerment Summit. So thank you so much. And at this time, we're going to have Steve Simpson, our Chief Strategy Officer, to talk about how we infuse DEIJ in our organization and within the DEIJ department. Steve?
Thank you. Good morning. Headed in the afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful day. You know, as we have these conversations, I think it's important to, as an outcome of these conversations, always focus on action and what are we going to do with this information, and as we expand our understanding in these areas. And you know, one of our real goals around strategic planning is to communicate more and really to help draw connections between everything that Loretta just shared with us, and our daily work and our impact on our working environment, our impact on our diverse student body. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes just to kind of reaffirm and communicate that the college's emphasis, focus, and support for these initiatives. And so just a little bit of information, right? So there are three components of the strategic plan that we're really advancing right now. And one of those components you'll see here is Better Together, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And so that is one of the three sort of college directions that we've adopted, really trying to focus on building a place to work, to educate, where students of all backgrounds, employees of all backgrounds, community members of all backgrounds can come and advance. And so as we move through the rest of today and in recognition of work that's happened, as we reflect on the conversation we just had, I think it's really important to see that connection to daily work and that connection to the college strategy that Peter spoke about at the very beginning of the session today. And so this is our strategic direction around DEIJ, to build an integrated diversity, equity, and inclusion infrastructure to support staff, students, and community. And I just want to highlight the word infrastructure, because I think a lot of times it's very easy to get lost in sort of the esoteric nature of some of these conversations. And it becomes a challenge to tie that back to action, right? I believe in this. I buy into this. This is who we are as a school. This is who I am as a person. But then I think the question becomes, how do we convert that buy-in, that support that we have for this work into action, into impact, more importantly? And our strategic plan is one way that we do this. And so, you know, as we were beginning to have these conversations around DEI and J, we really felt an importance on elevating it, right? It's fine to say that you do those things, but is the college really acting on those? And so we felt it really important to integrate this and state it in our college strategy. And so that's what you see here. One third, so to speak, of our college strategy is really focused on DEIJ, and particularly in terms of concrete work, equity as it relates to student outcomes is sort of kind of one of our real formal KPIs that we have as an organization. So what's nice about this conversation is that the work we're doing in DEIJ also shows how we can nest daily work under action planning, under college strategy. Becomes a real clear example of how we see connections from sort of loftier institutional aspirations down through to daily work and the work that we do every day when we show up to the office. Next slide, please, Ken. And so that's the component of our college strategic plan. And then within that, underneath that, Christina's worked really hard to develop a DEIJ strategic plan, right? So it's the nesting of strategy to guide work. And so there are 4 areas that we're currently advancing right now. We're working to increase diversity, right? Increase access. We've looked at our college composition. We've disaggregated our data. If you've ever listened to anyone in IE, they talk about data disaggregation all the time. Really looking to understand and make sure that we are not only promoting the environment, but bringing in a diverse group of stakeholders. And some of that happens organically through student enrollment, but there are other areas where we perhaps need more attention in terms of employees, hiring practices, those kinds of things. The other area of focus that we have in Christina's plan is to ensure equity, right? And specifically, we have a lot of focus on student outcome equity. As we talk about school success, as we talk about whether it's the state conversation on 60 by 30, 80 by 30 in Oakland County, we know at OCC from all the analysis that we've done that one of our biggest opportunities is to increase the equity of outcome we see in our students. So if you kind of lay OCC on top of Oakland County from an access perspective, we don't really perform terribly in terms of access as you look at different demographic indicators by race and ethnicity, age, gender. We bring in a population that's reflective of our community. Where we see a breakdown in our systems is in the outcome, right? We know that Black and African American students at OCC are less likely to achieve their degree, to graduate. We know that Black men in particular are less likely to graduate, right? So they come here with expectations of earning a college credential, but they're leaving without it. Same thing we see with a lot of our adult population. We see that, part-time adults come here at a very high rate, proportional to what we see, proportional to what we might expect in terms of the educational landscape with adults, with some college being a big part of that, but we see them leaving at a much higher rate. So really trying to focus on what are the systems we have that can ensure not only that we bring in a diverse student population, but that we can meet our mission and graduate and educate and provide the outcome of attainment, which we know leads to so many more of those sort of generational changes in families. The third piece of this is in part how we achieve that completion metric is to ensure inclusion, right? And inclusion with our employee base and inclusion with our students, right? Making sure that all of the people we brought to this organization or who came to this organization feel included, that they contribute to the work that we do or feel included in the educational process and they feel valued. The last piece of this is to enhance engagement. And today is one example of engagement, but also engagement with our students, engagement that the students have with our curriculum, engagement that employees have to feel competent and proficient to provide this type of environment. And so this is, and I won't go through all these around you, you can see some of the measures, right, of how we've taken sort of the esoteric strategic planning goal and then gone down one level to kind of operationalize it through Christina's plan, and then really defined measurement. And through that kind of logical progression through planning, that's how we achieve accountability, right? We define a goal, we define our plan, our methodology, and then we also define our measurement. And through this process and having planning, this type of nested planning, That's how we get to impact. That's how we take the conversation of today and translate that into action and impact. Next slide, please, Ken. And so really there are four sort of themes built into that, right? These are sort of the clusters of college action that are going to support Christina's plan. The first is DEIJ education, making sure that we have the knowledge, the skill set, the emotional intelligence, all of these things that we need to provide that infrastructure. And the infrastructure that supports that is training and professional development, both for staff and students. And I would stress globally that everyone at the college needs to be versed in these issues, in these matters, in these skill sets, and making an intentional effort to develop those through DEIJ education. The second piece of that is culture, how we talk about these issues. Christina and I presented just a month ago at the Higher Learning Commission conference. And what we talked about, and I'll be brief, that was an hour-long presentation, but to distill that down is that DEIJ need not be an add-on, a silo of college operations. It really needs to become the lens through which we see what we do, right? And part of that is after we've done the training, we have to develop the skill sets of our employees, our staff, so that they can then look at what they do through that lens to find gaps, to find opportunities. And that touches every department, every facet of what we do in some way touches these things. And so it's not a question of doing events. It's not a question of training necessarily. It's a question of training to develop the right perspective through which we collectively view how we operate as a college, how we function. The third area that we're really looking to advance on is communication. So this is part of it, right? Me talking about how this body of work directly relates to college strategy, but also making sure that we have spaces, intentional spaces to learn, to continue to collect input, continue to have survey mechanisms, to continue to seek out input that helps inform how our culture is performing, how our educational efforts are developing our staff and students to engage in these conversations. And then the last piece, as I've spoken for, kind of the outcome of this, the closing of the continuous quality improvement loop, is to be intentional about having measurement and review of measurement to promote accountability. And so, very thankful for this time, because I think this becomes a great example of how we can approach this in other areas of college. And as we talk about college strategy and really trying to make it something that everyone can see and feel and touch. And so this is a great example of that. Next slide, please, Ken. So it's a tentative college strategy. There's a plan underneath it. We have well-defined metrics and outcomes and measurement so that we can have a high level of accountability. And these are just some of kind of the insights and considerations as you reflect on conversations today and as we finish out the session today. Our goal is stated there at the bottom, right? We want to help double graduation. And we know that one of our biggest opportunities is to increasing equity of outcomes. So as we leave this conversation today and you reflect on your work, these are some things for you to consider. Are we being inclusive? Do we provide a shared experience? Do we understand our students and what they're experiencing? Do we reflect in our actions as a college, as an employee culture, what we say we want to accomplish? And are we really focused on innovation and improving the organization, right? I don't think this is new to OCC in terms of a belief system. I feel like this has been here since I've gotten here 3 years ago, and most likely long before this, right? We've got a long history of work and conversation in these areas. I think what we'd really like to shift is to that focus on tactical action, which is sometimes perhaps the most boring way to approach this work. But it's the most important, right? Dissecting what we do, our systems, our structures, and then our role in supporting those systems and structures and changing them to help us achieve a new goal, a new high, a new level of performance as it relates to student completion and doubling graduation. So, I'll close now. I just asked for a few minutes to kind of help make this connection, but as you leave here today and you're sort of wrestling with what's been said and what's to come, really take a few moments to reflect on your daily work and think about, how am I helping to contribute to this? What could I be doing differently? What ideas might I have? And as you have those ideas, the strategic planning infrastructure is a way to share those ideas, to help vet ideas, to help create new actions. So as you're thinking, as you're reflecting, if you have ideas coming out of today, please reach out to us. You can email us at strategicplanning@oaklandcc.edu. Drop us a note. You can attend a committee meeting. There are a lot of mechanisms for anybody on this call today to help contribute to this planning, because it's going to take everybody, right? We've gathered all sort of the willing parties together, but it's not everybody, and we know there are other ideas, better ideas out there. So if you have something you'd like to try, something you think might help, something you're doing that you'd like to bring focus and light to, you can email me, you can email strategicplanning@oaklandcc, or you can attend any of the strategic planning committee meetings and share those ideas. And those would be a very welcome outcome of today as we continue to advance this work. So thank you for the time, Christina. I appreciate it. And hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. And I want us to all see that we're all doing the work together. And so the Office of DEIJ may be a small office, but it's a mighty office because we're all working together. At this point, I want to shift to our advisory committees. So our advisory committees actually provide a lot of insight to our Office of DEIJ in terms of some of the items that we should be working on and how we can improve in these areas. So at this point, I'm going to ask Sean DeSico, who is part of our Accessibility Advisory Committee, to come and speak about our advisory committee. And then all of our members from each one of those advisory committees will have an opportunity to talk about the advisory committee. Thanks, Sean.
Hi, thank you, Christina. My name is Sean DeSico. I'm the Access Coordinator at the Highland Lakes campus, and I wanted to talk to you just for a couple minutes about the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Our Accessibility Advisory Committee was created in January of 2022 and is part of the Office of DEIJ. The Accessibility Committee was formed to advise and assist the college in promoting a welcoming and inclusive environment for people with disabilities. Our committee fosters collaboration across departments to promote an inclusive, welcoming climate and achieve appropriate accessibility. We promote student and employee equal access to learn, participate, and contribute to the OCC community. This includes all of our physical campuses, remote instruction, as well as for all OCC programs, activities, and events. We are committed to identifying training and other opportunities to increase employee and student awareness of accessibility issues and disability inclusion. The Accessibility Advisory Committee has a broad spectrum of expertise, which includes representatives from numerous departments throughout the college. The Accessibility Advisory Committee has in the past year already made some amazing progress in collaboration with many people in multiple departments. We hosted our very first Autism Summit, which was wonderful. We had an expert panel, a student panel, and an amazing guest speaker. I do hope you were all able to be a part of that. Our committee recommended adding standardized syllabus language regarding access and disability services to all of the syllabi. This initiative was approved by College Academic Senate on December 8th of 2022, so that'll be moving forward. The access departments have also partnered with our admissions team to add verbiage to our OCC application that will ask students upfront whether they will be needing any accommodations or disability services. If the student clicks yes, their information will automatically generate to the access department so that we are able to get to the student early on in the onboarding process. We are creating an accessibility page through the DEIJ website that will contain valuable information, as well as provide a way for employees and students to document disability concerns. The accessibility complaint The accessibility complaint concern form will be generated through the Maxient software system. We have also collaborated with our Human Resources Department to create a page that can be found on Inside OCC that details college policy and addresses accessibility and accommodations for employees. We have partnered with our IT departments to ensure that our electronic campus maps include accessibility information, include reserved parking, and accessible pathways. And last but not least, our ATG group is an integral part of our advisory committee, and they continue to provide us with beneficial information as well as faculty and staff with learning opportunities, webinars, hands-on training to ensure that accessibility for the entire OCC community, which we're really excited about. So if you haven't had a chance to check out their website, I definitely encourage you to do so. We have a lot of wonderful things planned for the next coming semester. So we're really excited about that. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can always reach out to one of us. But I appreciate you logging in this morning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leah. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. I'm Dr. Leah Agason, and I'm the Associate Dean of Math and Science. The Academic Advisory Committee began in July of 2020, and it serves to support OCC's mission and values of welcoming people of diverse backgrounds and abilities, empowering our students to succeed, and helping all our students attain goals equitably. For our part, that means bringing awareness and education regarding the many obvious and subtle factors that at play that create and perpetuate academic outcome gaps. As a committee, we decided to start with our own education, and we reviewed the results of the Ruffalo Noel Levitz Student Satisfaction Survey, and we also formed the Bridges Out of Poverty Book Club. Bridges Out of Poverty, Strategies for Professionals and Communities was originally published in 1999, and it's now on its 5th edition. It is a wonderful resource that lays clear the hidden rules of different economic classes and some of the many hidden obstacles that come with poverty. The lessons of the book are so powerful and relevant that a college-wide training session was held this past February. It was facilitated by guest speaker Katina Kane, Dr. Katina Kane, and the workshops were interactive. They provided us with not just information, but tools and strategies. And we also were able to maintain a resource booklet to use henceforth. So there's a chapter in the book that discusses how people often use words to form judgments about others, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. The cultural and regional differences of language uses are vast, and there are many words and phrases in common usage that are not truly inclusive, and they may even be offensive to some. Seeking to raise more awareness of these things gave rise to Words Matter, a 3-part discussion series on the importance of words. In part 1, Words Hurt, we focus on our ability to understand and be understood by others, and how we use language as an unintentional means to form opinions about others and how hurtful this can be. In part 2, Say My Name, we discuss why it's important to address others in the manner in which they have chosen. This includes their name, if they change their name, if they prefer a nickname or not a nickname, and also their pronouns. And in part 3, That's Not a Compliment, we focus on microaggressions framed as compliments, the harm they cause, and strategies for a response in those situations. We also talked a great deal about how we can all be more mindful when we speak to not perpetuate microaggressions or to put them on other people unintentionally. Participation in all 3 parts of the series earned you a completion certificate from the Office of DIJ. So I hope you were able to get yours. And that's just a summary of our activities for this past school year. It's been my pleasure to serve on this committee and to continue to serve. It's been a pleasure. It's a great group of people to work with. We are really trying to make some headway on a lot of the issues that Steve Simpson just brought to your attention. So at this time, I will turn you over to a representative of the DEIJ Student Advisory Committee, Dean Watson.
While Dean, there he is. Dean, you want to unmute yourself, please?
How's that?
Perfect.
I was talking away. So I just started off, I said, wow, great presentation, Loretta. It was really inspirational. You know, I didn't really have a term for it before, but I might just call Deej Christina's calling. So OCC is a great place to gain valuable skills. It's convenient and cost effective. You know, I'm a student, but I've had a lifelong career already, and I believe in continuous improvement, both personally and professionally. And so this is a great opportunity for some of that personal improvement. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You know, from a student's perspective, students want to be more engaged at OCC, and so did I. So we get involved with the DEIJ Student Advisory Committee. You know, and on behalf of the Student Advisory Committee, I just want to thank Christina for her passion, caring, and relentless pursuit of student empowerment. You know, OCC is truly blessed to have her here. You know, over my career, I've witnessed a lot of social injustice and just wanted to get involved in these social justice issues. And so do a lot of other students here at OCC. You know, OCC has a highly diverse student population, but we've also gone to more remote learning. And so it's hard to become involved as a student. So I think what goes on in campus and in the labs, in the halls, and online is important. And really, DEIJ provides a framework for the OCC community and students, you know, to understand each other, support each other, and care about all the perspectives that we as a society can grow with. It also provides understanding, mutual support, and inspiration for each other. So we have a number of students on the committee. We a lot of times brainstorm ideas on how to improve the community at OCC. We listen to each other. And for many people, it's very hard to speak out for yourself and for others. You know, how do you respond when you see a wrong being committed? If you speak out, will you yourself become a target? You know, I've heard a lot of, you know, issues on bullying situations where victims, you know, only feel like they can turn to violence. And so if there's a platform where people can speak out, where they feel cared about, respected, and heard, maybe we can reduce the culture of violence in our society. You know, DEIJ also provides a bigger voice for important issues, including supporting the people who stand up for others. The student advisory section also provides a reality check. You know, so the students are your boots on the ground, gives students a firsthand opportunity to bring those issues, you know, to Christina, who then, you know, has raised them, and we get results. So it provides a good platform for ideas, support for all students, and support for a lot of people. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dawn Perkowski.
Thanks so much, Dean. Hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Perkowski. I'm the curriculum analyst in the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, and I'm also currently the chair of the LGBTQ+ Advisory Committee. For those unfamiliar, the kind of mission of the LGBTQ+ committee is to make sure that we identify areas of importance, programmatic interventions, and resources that will support LGBTQ+ issues. And the purpose is to really advise the director of DEIJ, Christina Marshall, on ways to support not only our students, but our staff, our faculty, and our community members, and make sure that we're supporting them in terms of their diverse sexual orientations, their sexual expressions, and their gender identities. So a few of the initiatives that we've been involved in this past year, first of all, we reviewed the Campus Pride Index to identify areas in which the colleges may be falling short, areas that we feel are important to our students and staff. And then we really turn to things such as some of you probably have noticed, the inclusion of gender inclusive restrooms. So on campuses and on our electronic digital mapping system, there should be gender inclusive restrooms noted on those. We also had an event in October that looked at LGBTQ plus laws and rights. And that event featured Jay Kaplan of the Detroit ACLU. For faculty unfamiliar, we also have a link that we have integrated into the student records system under student quick links in the menu for D2L. And this allows students to put in the chosen name if they would like to use that instead. And then we've also recently been working on the implementation or re-implementation of the Student Club, which was previously known as Spectrum and will now be called the Queer Student Alliance. So for anybody that's unfamiliar with the committee, again, feel free to look at, the internal or external page. Contact Christina Marshall. We would love to have you. If you have ideas, let her know, because that work is very important to the college. And with that, I want to turn it over to Christina Marshall.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you to all of the members and the spokespersons of our advisory committees. At this time, we're going to talk about some of the work that we are doing in the community. We have a lot of community that we are engaged in. So first we'll talk about PNC Bank. You heard from the regional president, but these are the signature events that PNC has so graciously helped us being able to sponsor monetarily. And they're also working with us on other events as well, but these are signature events. After PNC Bank, next slide, please. We also have worked not only here at OCC in providing implicit bias training, which is a requirement of the state for all healthcare professionals. So we have done that with our counselors here at OCC, and we also have provided that training to our K through 12 counselors as well. Also offering them not only the training that is required for their credentialing, but as well as offering continuous education credits for individuals. We also have provided that implicit bias training for our nursing faculty, as well as our nursing students. In addition to offering implicit bias training, we've collaborated with the ceramics department, culinary, as well as our Office of DEIJ to do a Empty Bowls fundraiser. And through that Empty Bowls fundraiser, we were able to donate $800 to for the what is it? Harvest. So Greater Harvest, we were able to donate $800 there. So here is just a little thank you note for us providing that monetary gift to them. In addition, we have also collaborated with many organizations throughout our campus, and here are some of them. And at this time, I'm going to have John Mitchell talk to us about the collaboration we have been doing with the Academic Senate.
Thanks, Christina. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is the pervasiveness of DEIJ in the Senate agenda. In addition to regular monthly campus Senate reports at all 4 campus Senates and a comprehensive report from Christina at College Senate every month, the place where these issues is now coming to the forefront in Senate is in our standing committees. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the way that Senate operates, a lot of the business of Senate handling academic matters at the college happens in our 8 standing committees. And I'm happy to report that at every single one of these committees, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice issues are now informing everything that we do. For example, I'm just going to go through these in sort of alphabetical order. The Academic Planning Committee now takes into account DEIJ issues as they advise the college on strategic plans and on connections with things like the DC W3 setup. Curriculum, where you would think this might not be something that's important, it is now assumed great importance. They're now when a minor or a major course revision comes through the curriculum and instruction committee, there are questions to be answered about the inclusive nature of the class, for example, and whether it's appropriately meeting the needs of our newly diverse student population. So even minor course revisions takes into account DEIJ issues. This has especially become important in the other curricular committee, which is the Curriculum Review Committee. And I know that Christina has met several times with this at CRC, as we call it. And as each discipline does its once every 5-year report, those disciplines and programs are compiling statistics and information that help inform us what's going on in this particular discipline or program to deal with diversity issues, make improvements, make our classes more inclusive, make our programs more inclusive, which then lead to better outcomes for students who prior to this have been underserved by what happens in the structures of our curriculum. Let's see, the Professional Learning Committee is offering all kinds of communities of practice, workshops, and other issues that are very often focused on DEIJ issues, and that's become a major force of the professional learning that gets done at the college, even down to things like how to devise your online course learning management system so that it better reflects the diversity of your students and includes those students who may not have the same level of experience with online learning systems. This is also true with the Distance Learning Committee as they develop policies for how we approach the ever expanding offers of our online courses, that they are kept at the same level of awareness of what's going on with diversity issues as our face-to-face classes. And it's certainly become a major factor in how we think about assessment with our student outcomes and assessment committee. These are now considerations that you want to take into account as you go through the college's common course outcomes, general education outcomes, and program outcomes to make sure that those outcomes reflect not only serving the students of our diverse community and including them, but also educating our students about diversity issues as part and parcel of what gets assessed in the class's outcomes. And even the Technology Management Committee has been addressing DEIJ issues in terms of access to Wi-Fi, access to other online resources for students, library access, and so forth. And finally, the last committee is our Standing Academic Standards Committee. This is a place where we really have started to look at our policies, our academic honesty policies, our copyright policies, are any of the college policies that are applied to students through the handbook or through the class processes, are we aware of students coming into our classes with different expectations about the justice that gets handled in college policies? Do we need to make our policies more inclusive down to the level of the syllabus that you present to your students in the classroom? And I think it's been an enormous sea change that we've seen over the last couple of years in how the academic aspects of DEIJ have now become like not just an appendage to what Senate does with academic work, but actually central to the mission of Senate's continuous process of evaluating, assessing, and then making recommendations for improvement to our curriculum and to the way we deliver academic information to students.
Thank you, John. I want to thank John, the Academic Senate, and every other department for all of their work in ensuring that we have equitable spaces for our students, but also for our employees as well. Making sure that all students have the right to succeed is important to each and every one of us here at OCC. As we continue on with our collaborations, next slide, please. We also have collaborated with outside partners as well, with the Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who has done work with us through our Hispanic Heritage Month. We are also part and parcel with the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, which is next month, which we will be participating in. We'll be offering a pre-institute conference session with a couple people from other institutions as well. We also served on the Royal Oak Human Rights Commission, actually helping to form that commission. We have presented at the Higher Learning Commission, as Steve noted. We've also worked with the Arab American National Museum, who was just here a couple of weeks ago. Currently, I'm at the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, their conference, which we also, I serve as a member of the membership committee. We've also spoke at the Auburn Hills Chamber of Commerce, and we were also part of a nomination for a diversity champion. We didn't win, but we were only one of 3 nominated, so we're still doing great. As you know, we're partnering with PNC Bank. We also presented at the Coupa HR conference and also part of the Troy Chamber of Commerce. Oh, and the Troy Chamber of Commerce, excuse me, is where we were nominated for the diversity champion, and we serve on the diversity committee for Auburn Hills Chamber of Commerce. So as you can see, we're busy out there in the community. New this academic year. So what are some of the new things that we're doing? This year, we have a social justice scholarship, which we just awarded to a student. We also have our Student DEIJ Impact Award. Our DEIJ Excellence Award is new. We also now offer an OCC certificate if you attend so many events and you go through that process. Our executive council now does a DEI strategic plan for each of their areas. Our maps, as you've already heard, included accessible routes and gender inclusive restrooms. The chosen name link has now been added to the student records under the student quick links menu. So that also is very new. And then the pledge. Next slide, please. So what are you pledging to? We have many people who have already signed up for the pledge. And at this time, you can sign up too. They just put the link in the chat that you're pledging to listen intently with compassion to understand others. You're pledging to inspire others by working together and by the examples that we set. You're pledging to value yourself, others, and contributions that we all make. And last but not least, you are pledging to empower a culture of caring and speaking up when something is not right. If you sign that pledge, you will be added to all of those individuals who have already pledged here at OCC to do those items. This pledge is not only for employees, but it is also for students and our community. So I hope that if you have not done so, you do so now. Next. This year, we've also offered a lot of professional learning opportunities. As you heard earlier, we've had the words matter. We've had bridges out of poverty. We've done lots of things with our celebrating of Hispanic Heritage Month, building a culture of accessibility. Our Autism Summit, we've had speakers from the Michigan ACLU. We did the Color of Care with Oprah Winfrey. We also had a CCDEIJ retreat, and we've worked with our criminal justice department to offer Policing Today, racial justice within the criminal justice field, with many individuals who are currently doing the work in the criminal justice field. We've also offered other professional learning opportunities like myths and misnomers of Native American culture. We've also offered Thanksgiving from a Native American perspective, racial harmony for Black History Month. Where do we go from here? And the Wild Women of Detroit. That was our second part of that one. We've also offered the Arab American Heritage, as well as upcoming Cultural Humility, which will be on April the 28th from 10 to 12. Please don't miss it. All of these professional learning opportunities provide us an opportunity to be able to understand one another better, to be able to create that safe space that we all want to create, and to be able to ensure that our students and our employees not only feel safe, but they feel included, and more importantly, they feel like they belong, because all of our students and employees belong here at OCC. At this time, I'm going to now turn it over to Donna Duham-Smith, who will talk about the events that we have done.
Thank you, Christina. Can we change the slide, please? Thank you. Okay, last September, we participated in the National Alliance on Mental Illness walk for the first time, and we're going to make this an annual event. There were about a dozen of us out there, students, staff, faculty, a spouse. We raised almost $500 for the event. And again, we're going to make this an annual event. So please keep your eye out as that approaches in this coming fall. We talked a little bit about the Hispanic Heritage Month, and we had a wonderfully delicious luncheon. What was nice about both that and then the Black History Month luncheon is that we teamed up with the culinary department and worked with the faculty, who in turn went to the students, who came up with recipes and that supported the theme of what we were after and what we were trying to represent for these different areas. And both events were just beyond successful, and really did introduce many of us to new foods that we had not tried before. MLK, we did What is Your Dream for the World, and had input from employees for what they would like to change, the changes they would like to see. And then as part of the MLK convocation, we had the keynote speaker, Dr. Carl E. James, who spoke on the global impact of social justice. We also, just a week or two ago, had the Beautifully Wrapped, the art of head wrapping. And that was, it just talks about the beauty, the history, and the cultural way to bring fashion, tradition, and culture together in what to many of us might just appear like a head wrapping, but it's got a story to tell. Our visual vernacular was offered up last fall at the Smith Theater. That was in order to bring deaf awareness to the audience. It focused on that and supported Deaf Awareness Month and the International Week of the Deaf. We had Justin Perez, an award-winning ASL performer, as part of that activity. And then you can go to the next screen, and I'm actually going to hand it back to Christina Marshall for this.
All right, so some of our upcoming events. We have our Cultural Humility Working with Deaf and Hard of Hearing Individuals training. This is a 2-hour training. It will take place on April the 28th from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. You should have received a calendar invite. This is for employees only. We also are going to be doing our second annual Youth Excellence Summit. This summit is for 9th and 10th graders who are underserved students to come over and get a better understanding of what college is like, and also be able to provide them with things like financial literacy and to speak with current students. This will take place on May the 2nd, and it is a half-a-day event. It begins at 8:30 and it goes until 1 o'clock, and it will take place on our Auburn Hills campus this year. Last year, it took place on our Southfield campus. We are then going to host our first OCC Exploration Camp. That will be a 2-week camp. We are working with some great academic partners to offer things like CAD, graphic design, as well as our health sciences, understanding that. Our criminal justice is going to be doing a CPR class. So the students will be able to take something away with them. And this 2-week camp begins July the 11th and goes till July the 21st. And it is from 8 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. As I've already talked about NCORE, and last but not least here, we will be having our very own Midwest DEI 2023 Bridging Equity, Creating Innovative Spaces for K-12 and Higher Education Conference. That's right, we will be having the very first in the country Midwest DEI conference that actually collaborates our K-12 DEI efforts with our higher ed efforts. That's right, here at OCC, we'll be the first ones. So those are just some of the things that we're doing in the office of DEIJ. Next, please. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our CC DEIJ Awards Chair, Kim Combs, who will be talking about our DEIJ Excellence Award winner.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. My name's Kim Combs, and I am the chair of the awards committee. The Birmingham, just to give you a little bit of background, the Birmingham House used to give out the Diversity Champion Awards to Oakland County businesses, and they have since stopped the award. So OCC has chose to keep honoring the award because of the importance of it to the college and the community. We have changed the criteria for the award to fit more into the college and what we think a DEIJ champion should be. I would like to also take this time to announce this year's DEIJ Excellence Award to someone so deserving of this award. I am honored to present this award to Sandra Harold Foster. Here are a few words.
Oh, sorry, Kim.
No, go ahead.
If Sandra can unmute herself, can show her camera at this time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Kim.
So now I'd like to take a moment to present you guys with a few words from Sandra's nominator. She calls out unfairness and inequities when she sees them and holds herself and the college to our vision of excellence in all we do. I have never heard her speak disrespect of anyone, even when calling out things that aren't equitable. Oakland Community College is lucky to have someone like Sandra on their team that is welcoming, inclusive, and wants to make the college a better place, not only for her, but all of our employees. On behalf of the DEIJ committee, congratulations, Sandra.
Thank you so much. What a surprise. And even trying to get my screen back together, I'm just taken aback. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we highlight Sandra for one moment, please? Congratulations, Sandra, and I'm happy to tell you that you don't have any presentations to provide. We just wanted to make sure that you were here. So congratulations on your so deserving award for being our DEIJ Excellence Award winner, our inaugural DEIJ Excellence Award winner for 2023. Congratulations, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, next slide, please. At this time, we would like to thank numerous individuals who made this year possible. We would like to thank our CCDEIJ committee members. As you can see their names listed on the screen. We would also like to thank our advisory committee members for all of our advisory committees, for all of the hard work that they do as well. We would also like to thank our DEIJ campus chairs for the work that they are leading on the campuses, as well as our partnerships. Without all of you and all of us being DEIJ champions, this work could never get done. Again, it is important for all of us to be able to create spaces where each and every one of our students, as well as our employees, feel as though they have an equitable opportunity to learn, as well as an opportunity to be included. And as we all say, together we are better. So on behalf of the Office of DEIJ, on behalf of OCC, thank you for all that you do. If there's anything that we can do for you in the Office of DEIJ, please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I'm going to leave you with our theme song. There ain't no stopping us now. Have a great day, everyone. And thank you so much for being here.